Welcome to NOAA Live Alaska. My name is Lisa Hiruki-Raring, and I'm going to be moderating today's webinar. This series is a collaborative effort by NOAA Fisheries Alaska Fisheries Science Center, where I work, NOAA's Alaska Regional Collaboration Network, and NOAA's National Weather Service. I'm also working with my co-coordinators, Story Oates and Mabel Baldwin-Schaefer, and our two interns, Emma and Elizabeth, who will be helping me behind the scenes. This webinar series is designed to help you get to know NOAA's work in Alaska, our partners, and the communities we work with in Alaska, and how we connect with their communities. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, studies the ocean and the atmosphere and where the two meet, from weather to ocean to the animals that live around us. This school year, we're presenting short series of webinars that are more regionally based so that we can focus on topics of interest to those regions of Alaska. We're aiming to present perspectives from the communities we work with, as well as research conducted by students, in addition to established scientists. We hope this gives you a look at different communities, as well as different career paths you might be interested in. Today, we're continuing our webinar series for the Northwest Arctic with a presentation by Lance Kramer, a traditional knowledge specialist in the Northwest Arctic Bureau. While we'll be talking about NOAA's and partners' role in research and stewardship, we want to recognize that we're all coming to you from the traditional lands of Indigenous communities who have substantial traditional and local Indigenous knowledge and much to share with us. Lance is presenting from Kotzebue, the lands of the Kikiktaruk Inupiaq, the original inhabitants of the area of Northwest Alaska surrounding modern-day Kotzebue, who have stewarded their lands and waters for thousands of years. We're indebted to their wisdom and knowledge of their lands and waters. We'd also like to acknowledge that we are hosting this webinar from the traditional lands of the Coast Salish, including the First People of Seattle, the Duwamish people past and present. Lance will be talking about subsistence life in his community in Alaska. Subsistence is the harvest and processing of wild resources for food and traditional cultural uses, and is covered by Alaska and federal laws highlighting the unique importance of wild resources and the continuing role of subsistence activities in the long-established ways of life in Alaska. Federal laws are the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, or ANILCA, which protects the subsistence needs of rural Alaska residents, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous. The Marine Mammal Protection Act, which allows subsistence harvesting of marine mammals by Alaska Native peoples. And the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which ensures that Alaska Native peoples may take migratory birds and collect their eggs for subsistence use. A few guidelines before I hand you over to our speaker. You're all muted because we have a lot of people on the line and we want to make sure that everyone can hear our speaker. However, there's a box where you can write questions. We encourage you to ask them as we go, and my colleagues Story and Mabel and our interns Elizabeth and Emma and I will be keeping track for Lance. He'll stop every now and again and answer a few questions. We may not get to all of our questions, but we'll try to answer as many as we can. Okay, I'll hand it over to Lance to introduce himself.
Hey there, everybody. Lance Kramer here from Kotzebue, Alaska. Welcome. Nice to have you guys. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear it great, Lance. Thank you.
Okay, good. Well, we're going to be talking today about the subsistence lifestyle of the Kikiktaruk Inupiaq people. And of course, Kikiktaruk means big island. And the peninsula that we live on here in Kotzebue is kind of a big island right now. There's a very narrow peninsula where we are, and then further down the coast. And then even the town that we sit on is almost an island. And so that's the name of our people here. Name of our community. And so, of course, we are Inupiaq people. Inu means person, and Piaq means real. We're the real people, and so we're the real people of Kotzebue. And so, the word you see down there, maybe at the bottom of your screen, also is Inunak, and that's the Eskimo word for subsistence. And so, Inunak means to live off the land. And so, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, let's move forward then to the next slide. Trying to see if I can move on to the next slide. There we go. Maybe I'll go this way. So you can see here the community of Kotzebue there on that little peninsula out in the ocean on the left there. And you can see some of the villages in our region: Kivalina, Noatak, Kayan, Norvik, Sawik, Kobuk, Shungnak, Ambler, Buckland, and Deering. So we live in Kotzebue right off of the Kotzebue Sound, and there's Noatak River just a little ways away from us, the mouth of it, and then to the east of us is the Kobuk River. So a lot of action happens here in Kotzebue in terms of hunting and fishing and trapping. You can see the community there. Very small, tight-knit community, about 3,000 people. And I think it's about a mile long and half a mile wide. We have the one airport there and runway. Alaska Airlines comes in twice a day, and we have various freighter planes coming in throughout the winter that bring food and things with them. Ships come in the summer, and barges bring fuel and food and lumber and trucks and boats and things. So Kotzebue is kind of the center, the booming town, I guess, for the rest of the villages. And so that's where I'm from. That's where I live, right there in Kotzebue. Any questions for Kotzebue?
We don't have any questions yet, but I wanted to encourage our viewers, if you have any questions, please type them into your question box and we'll ask them as we go.
All right, sounds good. And then this is my family. I'm there in the center. My wife Karina next to me. To the right on the picture is my son Cody. He's a junior in high school this year at Kotzebue Middle High School. And then, of course, even further to the right is Savannah and Peach. Savannah is a nurse here. She does women's health at Maniluk. And then, of course, Peach is an assistant pastor of mine. I'm a pastor of a non-denominational church here in town. I used to be a teacher. I graduated from UAF and majored in English and minored in Inupiaq. And so became a teacher here. I taught at JNES, in fact, with Miss McConnell years ago. And so I taught 3rd and 4th grade, and I really liked it. I coach Native Youth Olympics here once in a while, do basketball radio announcing for basketball games here in the region. As we look to the left of me in the picture is my little boy Tai Tai. He's not so little anymore. He's 14 and he's taller than me. So, and then to the left of him is Cassidy, my other daughter, and she's going to school at UAF as well, and she'll be a teacher. She'll be teaching high school over here at Kotzebue Middle High School science. So maybe another year or so. And she's been pretty active with forums and panels with climate change and things. And then, of course, to the left of her is my older daughter, Melissa, and her boyfriend, Rudy. And so they live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where it's nice and warm. Melissa's in acting, and so she played Sacagawea on the Men Who Built America series for A&E. And so yeah, that's my family. We also have 2 grandchildren now since this picture was taken. So Melissa and Rudy have a daughter named Isla. She's about 1.5 years. And then, of course, Peach and Coco have baby Atlee, and she's 5 months old. So this is my family. And so we're going to be talking about, when we talk about subsistence, we really want to bring up the seasons, because in every season, there's always something to get. There's always something to do. In Kotzebue, in most of rural Alaska, there's really no farming. We don't plant any seeds. We don't till any soil. We just harvest. It's much unlike the lower 48, where you have to do all kinds of work to get something. Here we just harvest every week of every year. And so we're going to be looking at springtime here. And so the month of April, you can see there some of the things that we get in April is brown bear. The grizzly bears are coming out of hibernation in April. Usually April 9th is the turning point in terms of weather. That's when you'll start to get warm weather here in Kotzebue, and it won't really get cold after that. And so lots of brown bears come out of their dens in around that time, and we can get 2 a year. And then of course there's bull caribou in April. We don't shoot females in April because they have calves in them. And so we want them to go ahead and bring up the next generation of caribou and keep the population healthy. And so, but we do get bull caribou if we need them as they're moving north in their migration. And then of course, sheefish here. You can see this is Trandon on the left and Tai Tai, my son, on the right with a couple of sheefish. Sheefish are like a really big whitefish. Some of them, and these are kind of small sheefish. They get almost as tall as these two boys right there. And they get like 20, 30 pounds. So these young fellas here get used to hauling in fish and cutting them and working on them. So we get a lot of sheefish in April. And it's a white flaky meat, kind of like halibut. And so you can fry it, you can bake it, you can make sheefish chowder, much like you'd have halibut chowder, things like that. So one of my favorites, favorite ways to eat sheefish is to fillet it, of course, and then you use a wooden spatula that's flat, and you kind of mash up the meat on the fillet, and then you scrape the meat off of the fillet, and the bones stay on the skin, and so all you have is just kind of this ground up meat, and then you put that in a bowl, and you put a couple of eggs in there, some breadcrumbs, some seasonings and things, and you make sheefish patties. And what's cool about them is you can actually make patties and store them between like wax paper, much like you do frozen hamburgers. And then you can have sheefish all year long, anytime you want to. Sheefish, fish sandwiches, basically. So really good stuff. Another use for sheefish is for king crab in the summer. And so a lot of people will have like a whole big extra freezer, like maybe outside their house or in their porch, and it's just full of big sheefish. And so come June, as you see later on, we'll be catching king crab, and sheefish is our main bait. So good food right there. A lot of dog teams, a lot of dog mushers in our area will have nets under the ice and catch a lot of sheefish, sometimes 300 to 500 sheefish a year for their dog team. And so they cook them and they give them to their dogs frozen, super high protein, and it's a good fatty fish for the dogs. So there's no shortage of sheefish, that's for sure. And then, of course, in April, it's kind of the last time of the year that we're getting wood with snow machine. Like I said, April 9th, the snow is starting to get too soft, and you get stuck in the mountains in the deep snow when it's too soft. But, you can make some trips here and there if you've got some trails already in the mountains and kind of get your last bits of spruce trees for the year. Any questions on springtime in April?
Yeah. Actually, Michelle was wondering what the temperature range is during that time of year.
Yep, it's above 30, above 32, I know around April 9th, because it's, like I said, it's constant thawing kind of day and night. Sometimes the nights get a little bit cool where there's ice back on the streets again, but it doesn't last long. 10 o'clock in the morning and it's already melting. So, between 30 and 45 degrees probably.
Great. And then you had mentioned getting wood. Do you go and cut firewood through the whole winter for heat?
Yeah, we do. Like right now, if you were to look outside my window, I've got some wood cut up outside. I was cutting up wood last night. My son and I, Tai Tai, we went up to the Notak River and cut down some trees up that way. We were actually lynx trapping and checking otter traps. And when you do that, you want to, you know, um, kind of do double duty and get wood while you're at it. And so we use wood to offset the cost of heat up here because stove oil costs so much. And so if you have a wood stove going in your house all day long, your furnace is not firing up to keep your house warm. The wood stove is. And so it saves a lot on stove oil cost every year.
Got it. And
Yep.
Donna was wondering if there is another name for sheefish that she'd never heard of sheefish. And there was also another question about whether it was a freshwater fish or a saltwater fish.
Yeah, it's a great question. The Eskimo word is S-I-I. The Eskimo people call them she. And then, of course, when the Westerners came here, they just called them sheefish. Inconnu, I think, is the scientific name, and Inconnu. They look a lot like a Florida tarpon. They've got these big old square mouths that open up really big. Their main food source is herring, and so they eat herring all winter long. They eat tomcods, they eat smelt, things like that. So just very voracious eaters down there, big time predators in the ocean. And so they live mostly in fresh water, but they don't mind salt water as long as it's not too terribly salty. We've caught them in the ocean before many times in the summer when it's brackish water, like half salt, half fresh. But they prefer fresh mostly. So, yeah.
Great. Let's see if there's another question here. So, Aletha, so you show cutting wood there. Aletha was wondering what kind of tools do you use to cut wood?
Well, we have chainsaws. You don't really need more than a 16-inch chainsaw. Sometimes you need an 18-inch chainsaw, but yeah, so we'll go out there with snow machines in them trees, and where Cody, you notice my son Cody there is standing with snowshoes on. If he were to take those snowshoes off and go into the snow, it'd probably be chest deep of snow. It's a super deep snow in the mountains and the trees, and because the trees stop all the wind, and any snow that's blowing through just falls straight down into the trees. And so we walk, of course, with snowshoes as we get into the trees, find a dead tree, and of course chainsaw them down. Cody here is using an axe because he has a brand new axe and he wanted to see if he can cut it down old style. But as you can see from the wood pile on the right, those are very, squared ends right there. We chainsawed those ones down and put them on a sled, a plastic sled, and then we're hauling them. These particular ones are being hauled to youth camp. We do youth camps in the summer in July, and so that pile of wood is next to our maki, next to our sauna. And so when we have youth camps in the summer, wood's already there ready for us. So nice dry spruce wood. Um, so you can see in these trees too that you can't see the top of Cody's tree. You can kind of see it if you look really closely at the top of Cody's tree on the left there, but it's dead, right? It's dead about starting halfway up. And that's kind of what you want. You want a half dead, half alive tree, mostly. And then, another one that you want is just a full dead tree where all the branches from top to bottom are all dead. You know it's a dead tree. One of the things that we do also is we will use an axe and we'll scrape the bark off, and we'll kind of see which way those grains, every tree has grains in them, like which way it's going. And sometimes those grains go straight up and down, much like you see on your wall or a table. There's grains, sometimes they go crooked and they twist. And so you kind of don't want to cut down a twisted tree because once you do cut them into logs, they're really hard to split. Now, if you've got an electronic or gas log splitter, it doesn't matter. But if you're chopping those logs with an axe, man, I'll tell you, it takes forever. And so we check trees before we saw them down to see if they're straight grain or if they're or twisted.
Yeah, I
There's
never thought about
the
that.
whole art to tree getting, I'll tell you.
Yeah, sounds like it. We had one more question from Ms. McConnell's class. One of the students was asking if she fish are year-round or if you only get them in April.
They're mostly year round. Like right now that we're getting them through the ice. In June we can get them with a fishing pole. uh, there's still, and there's small ones around all summer long, like in July there's not as many, but those big ones, what happens is towards the end of um, April and May, what they're doing is they're heading up the Kobuk River and the Selwyn River, and those are the two rivers that they spawn. They don't spawn up the Notak River. And so those really big males and big female sheefish, the older ones, they'll go up those two rivers and go spawn in the summer, lay their eggs and make young sheefish. And so that's what they do. That's why Kayana will get them later on in July. You'll see people in Kayana. Later on, you'll see people in Kobuk, Shungnak, and Ambler catching sheefish with rods and reels. And almost all of their sheefish that they catch in the summer are just these big monster fish because they're the real big ones that spawn. And sheefish, they're an interesting fish. They don't get to that stage in life where they're going to go ahead and spawn until they're 7 years old. And so it takes them a while to get to that maturity. So, But fortunately, there's plenty enough for us to get down here and throughout the year that we don't overharvest them.
Boy, you could do a whole talk just on sheefish, I bet. I know you have a lot of a lot more information to go through, so maybe we should hold the rest of the questions and keep going.
Sure, sounds good. So we get into May, and May is a real sloppy month down here in Kotzebue. Lots of mud, lots of puddles and things like that. It's very thawed out here in May. May 5th is usually like Cinco de Mayo. That's kind of the day that birds come to Kotzebue for the most part. You can almost kind of count on it. And the reason I know is because when I went to school at UAF, whenever school usually ended May 5th, and I would come on the 6th back to Kotzebue from Fairbanks from college, and then the birds would be here and my buddies would be out hunting. And so we get a lot of ducks, we get a lot of geese, swans and cranes. And so it's a lot of fun hunting out there. This is my daughter Dee Dee, and you notice she's wearing a life jacket and she's wearing ear protection, as well as a float coat, so that she can. It's dangerous sometimes in the spring when you're hunting like this. Your boats can tip over. You can get into some accidents and things. And then, of course, when you're shooting shotguns, you always want to have ear protection. Myself, you guys don't know this about me, but my left ear is about 90% deaf. I can't hear out of that ear. And so it was from shooting. And if you're a right-handed shooter like this, your left ear will go if you don't have hearing protection, because it's the closest to the barrel of the gun. And the issue with guns is the sound is so hard and so fast that your eardrum doesn't have time to close before that sound comes. And so when that sound comes without your eardrum closing, you do a lot of damage to it. There was a scientist who above New York there, who was looking at those Inuit people in Canada, and he was wondering, why are all these people deaf? Why can't they hear these old men? You know, the old women can hear fine, but the old men can't hear anything. And so this scientist went up and did these tests, and he lived among them for a couple of years. And he was like, how could they be deaf? It's so quiet up here. You know, there's no raging machinery and trucks and horns and things like in New York City. And he's like, how are these people getting deaf? Finally, he was invited on a spring bird hunt. And so as soon as a shotgun was shot and his ear started ringing, he knew then what was going on. That's probably the single most cause of deafness among Inuit people is shooting guns without ear protection. So important to have that at a young age. So as you can see here in May, we still getting bull caribou if you need them. If you don't need them, you don't get them. They're still moving north a lot of times. We still get sheefish in May through the ice. Sometimes there's a channel that breaks in front of Kotzebue from the Noatak River, and that channel usually breaks about May 22nd. If we were to do like the Nenana Ice Classic with the tripod and the ice and all that, I would always put my bets on May 22 or May 23. I've been keeping track for, I don't know, over 20 years. And that's usually when the ice will break up in front of Kotzebue there. And we can get upriver with boats and things then, no more snow machines. And we get up to the river and hunt up there. So we'll get a lot of waterfowl. You can see too on my list, we're getting herring when that ice is breaking up. A lot of that herring is following the ice as it's coming down. They don't want to get eaten by seagulls. And so if there's a floating piece of ice, they stay under that floating piece of ice like this. And so seagulls can't get them. And so, but what we do is we just kind of wait for these moments in between ice, and we cast snagging hooks, and we get as many herring as we want, really. There's just thousands upon thousands of them. And then you scale them, head and gut them, brine them in salt, and then eventually pickle them if you want. Some people smoke them. They're pretty bony fish, so you kind of you got to can them kind of thing if you want to deal with the bones. But good fish though. We're getting seagull eggs and waterfowl eggs. We're also getting cranberries and tundra tea off the tundra. Um, and so you can see here, this is a seagull egg. They're very camouflaged with their nest. And so my family and I, we kind of have this little spot where we go every spring with a little boat, and we'll go check these nests and these islands for seagull eggs. And notice this nest here has one egg. Sometimes nests will have three eggs or two. Now, if a nest has three eggs, we leave those nests completely alone because we know that that's all that the mama is going to make, the mother seagull. And what happens is these birds, I don't know if you kids know, but these birds will have, if you were to kill a duck or a goose or a swan or a seagull, it's illegal to kill seagulls, but if you were and you were to dissect it, you'll see inside, especially the females, you'll see just a long string of eggs in them. And it's like a little string of these beads, really, big beads all the way to small beads. And what those are is those are eggs. And so that seagull will lay the first three beads on that string on that necklace, right? And she'll have all of her DNA and all of her goodness in those first three eggs. And so she will lay them, and if those eggs are coming to fruition, why, if they're starting to get birds, what happens is the rest of those little beads in her body just kind of dissolve and get soaked into her body for nutrition. And so now, the thing too, though, is that let's say Lance Kramer comes when the seagull lays its first egg. So this is the first egg out of the bead, right? And I pick it up. Well, guess what? She's got 50 more on that necklace, right? And she'll just keep laying more and more eggs as needed. If there aren't any in the nest, she'll just keep plopping them out, keep plopping them out, because she got a whole string of them in her body. And those are like the just in case eggs, you know? And so what we do is we'll get a seagull egg, and when it's one egg like this, we know it's pretty fresh now, and it's really good to eat. It's just a yolk and the egg white in it. Now, if it's two eggs in there, we will check them. We'll put them in the water, and when you put them in clear water and the egg sinks to the bottom, if it's flat like this, like laying flat at the very bottom, and then you know that egg is good. It's just got a yolk and whatever. It's like a chicken egg. Now, if that egg is kind of floating with part of it like a 45-degree angle, you know that it's starting to, the chick is starting to form in there. There's some blood vessels and things like that, and the egg will be kind of runny and not that great tasting. Now, if that egg is still at the bottom, but it's floating and it's floating vertically like this, right? Here's the water level. Um, then you've pretty much got eyeballs and a beak in that egg, maybe a little bit of like wings and stuff. No feathers, but you'll just start seeing the formation of the bird. Some people like to eat that. I think the Filipino people call that balut, and so they like that when you boil that up and eat that. I don't personally, but so anyways, if you check it and it's like this, what we do is we get that seagull egg and we put it back in the nest, and we're like, okay, that one's going to turn into a bird. Um, but we do keep those fresh ones like that. And you can keep checking eggs as long as you want. You keep track of which nests you're picking, and you can pick them all throughout July. And just like a chicken egg, just like a chicken nest, you can go and pick them and eat them. And the farther that you go along in July, the smaller those eggs get. Like I said, the first few eggs on that necklace are really big eggs, and they taste kind of gamey. But as you move on towards those small little extra eggs on that necklace, um, they get smaller. You can put them in a chicken egg carton, and then you can, when you eat them, they taste like a chicken egg. They taste really tame and good eating. You can actually bake cakes with seagull eggs. And I'll never forget one trick I did one time. I came home and we took an egg that was kind of like this, and we took it with us, two or three of them, if I remember right. And one of my cousins over here, Herman Rich Jr., he had a chicken coop by Crowley when he lived here. And his sons and his daughter-in-law from Texas goes out and checks this chicken coop. And I thought, man, I'm going to play a trick on my cousin. So I brought those seagull eggs to his coop at night. Now it doesn't get dark in the summer, but you know what I mean. At least somebody's probably sleeping anyways. But I snuck into their chicken coop, and then I put these seagull eggs in those nests, and so because I wanted to see baby seagulls coming up, and then wondering how in the world did these chickens make seagulls. But unfortunately, the daughter-in-law from Texas was going through the coop the next day and saw them and said, "What in the world? What kind of eggs are these?" So Herman Rich later on saw them, and right away he knew who who put those eggs in that chicken coop. So, anyways, that's a long story, but that's chicken egg or seagull eggs for you.
That's pretty funny.
Yep. Any questions about May?
So we had a question about, so Ms. Duchesne's class was wondering, where do you go hunting in the spring? You had talked about going to some of the rivers, and I was wondering whether with the seagulls, are those along the rivers as well, or do you have specific places you go?
Yeah, those are right there at the mouth of Noatak, right on the edge on the delta. There's a huge, big old delta there with lakes and sloughs and things like that. There's hardly any willows. It's very flat, muddy country, and these seagulls lay eggs on these little grass islands in those lakes. There's hardly any foxes there. There won't be any bears there too much. You'd think that there would be bears eating all these eggs because it's only like knee-deep water most of the time. And so, but yeah, we go just a little ways, about 7 to 8 miles, I think, to the mouth of Noatak, and then you kind of can go into those sloughs there and hunt waterfowl and pick eggs.
Wow, neat. Well, I know that you have a lot to talk about in summer too, so maybe we should move on with summer and then we'll answer questions as we go.
Sounds good. You're going to notice here in June some of the same things that we get, right? Sheefish, waterfowl, herring, seagull eggs. We're getting wood upriver with boats because the huge melt that happens in the mountains and up the Noatak River, it just floods the banks with water really high, and any dead trees that are coming down will float down with that high water. And so we'll go upriver and we'll search the edges of this high water river, and we'll get basically free wood. Sometimes that wood even comes out right by Kotzebue as it's going out into the ocean. And years ago, Eskimos would sit on the beaches with lassos and hooks and things, and they would just sit and wait for all day, all night, and a log would come down, and they would see the stump coming down and the big log, and they would lasso the stump and pull it to shore. And you don't have to spend any gas that way. You can just have a lot of free wood. So a couple of springs ago I did that, but I had my little boat right there, and so we would just sit, my brother and I, and wait, and we'd see a log way up, and we go up there and chainsaw the stump off, and then we attach a line to that log and haul it to the shore. And I had enough almost for a whole year, just in 4 or 5 days of nonstop getting wood day and night. And so really good way to get wood for our homes. As you can see, as well as we go along the circle, we're getting bearded seals in June out on the ocean. Beluga whales are coming around. They're kind of calving in Kotzebue Sound. There's king crab here in Kotzebue Sound in June. They're going to these places wherever there's a stream coming out of the land, like along the coast by Krusenstern. Anywhere there's a freshwater stream, these crabs will go towards that in the ocean. They need that little bit of fresh water to help them, get ready to get that old skin off, that old shell off with the barnacles and things on it. And then they have a brand new shell, exoskeleton, I guess you call it, that they have. And so when we're crabbing in June, you'll get some that are just all barnacled out, just, they're still, meat is still good. And then you'll see some in your crab pots that are brand new, fresh shells. And that's what they're doing. And we meet them at those places. We put crab pots down 30, 40 feet of water, and you have a big sheefish snap in the middle of the crab pot. And then these crab will smell that, and they go along the bottom of the ocean, and they want to eat that sheefish, and they go into your crab pot, and then they can't get back out because your crab pot has these fingers like this, these plastic fingers. You can go in but the plastic fingers close as you try to come back out. And so some nights, you know, if you have 5 or 8 pots, you can come back with 100 king crab or 200 crab, all every 3 or 4 days in June. And so in June, we're also picking greens. There's like sea lovage on the beaches that we put in our seal oil, and it helps with, there's no, your seal oil won't have mold in it when you put that particular type of green leaves in it. And then of course there's whitefish and trout in June. So you can see here my son Tyler with his bearded seal there. They can get to, oh, I don't know, 500 pounds maybe. They're pretty big creatures here. These are the adult bearded seals. They're 6 to 8 feet long, and they have a lot of blubber on them. The skin on the females is good and real good for mucklucks and things. And of course, the meat is just super good for black meat, for dried meat. Now, these bearded seals also, you notice all that white ice. White ice is really important to seals. It means that the ice is thick. If you have brown ice or gray ice, that means the ice is thin, and bearded seals don't really like dirty ice. They don't like that gray ice. They like real nice white ice. Well, the issue is as climate change has happened over the years, we're seeing less and less white ice in the spring. And so, and we know this because we look at NOAA's website, and they have a sea ice analysis part on their website, and we can see the sea ice in our Kotzebue Sound. I think it's updated every 4 to 6 hours. And so in June, a lot of hunters will get online, go to NOAA and do the ice office desk and look at it and see where that white ice is. Once we know where it is, we go there with a boat, and then we'll go look around with a boat on the edges of these white ice and find these bearded seals sunning themselves and getting rest. Yep, so here we've got bearded seal hunting in June. The ice usually breaks up around June 5th out in the ocean out here. And so what we do is we follow the websites that show us where the ice is currently. There are satellite images pretty much every day. And so we look to see where white ice is, and we go out there, and the ice you can see here, it's myself and my nephew and my son on the left, Tyler. And these bearded seals can get to about 300 to 500 pounds a piece, and it's a lot of meat right there. And you can see the blubber on this bearded seal. It's only about 1.5 inches thick. Years ago, it used to be 3 to 4 inches thick. But with climate change the way it is now and less ice, I think that the seals are actually swimming a lot more rather than laying down and resting a lot more. And so therefore you have thinner blubber. And what we do is we'll bring this seal into the boat. We get these small intestines, as you see Cassidy has here, and then we'll bring that seal to the beach eventually, to our drying racks in town. This is out in the ocean about 15 miles. And then once we get it to town, we will take the skin and the blubber away from the meat. We'll use an ulu. And once we do that, we let that skin and blubber just kind of sit in the sunshine, and that blubber will get a coating on it. And so we want to take that coating off because it has blood on it usually. And then we'll just have pure blubber, and we'll take that blubber off the skin. We'll cut them into small pieces, really thin pieces, and put them in 5-gallon buckets. And we stir that blubber. It's kind of a strange thing to hear blubber being stirred, but it is what it is. But anyways, we stir that blubber up, and then over about 2 weeks time, I reckon, it turns into an oil, kind of like olive oil. It looks like olive oil. And so once you have it as oil, then we'll strain it usually with a game bag over another bucket into jars, sometimes smaller buckets. And then what we do is we're going to get those intestines, as you see Cassidy has here. That's from one bearded seal. They have large, or long intestines there. But anyways, we cut these intestines out there on the ice. We will fill them up with water, and then we kind of run that intestine through our fingers, and we squeeze out any food and A lot of times there's tapeworms in those intestines. And so we want to use that salt water to just clean those intestines out as good as we can out there. And so then we braid them like this. We keep them in ice and in the shade on the boat ride home because they can get rancid pretty fast. And so then we bring them home and we undo this big old braid here. Sometimes we'll put them underneath our sink and we kind of connect it to our sink like this with our hands and turn on the faucet, and the water runs through those intestines and cleans them out, really, really good with a lot of good pressure. And it looks like a big old garden hose that's just full of water, and it starts spouting on the other end. Well, it'll spout green kind of at first, and then later on it'll be nice and clear water, and that's what you want. You know that the intestines are clean on the inside. Then we begin to boil them, usually about 6-inch pieces in buckets or big pots with salt water. And then we hang them to dry and let them just kind of dry for a few days. And we put them in seal oil buckets with the seal oil. That way they won't get freezer burned. They're surrounded completely by oil. And then you see on the right there is the bearded seal meat. And you can see how dark red it is. As it dries, it'll be pitch black. We call it black meat. And so it has a lot of iron in it. And iron as an element is an oxygen grabber. Iron molecules grab oxygen molecules and bring them in. And that's what those seals want, right? They want as many oxygen molecules as possible so that when they do dive and feed for a long ways, why they've got a lot of oxygenated blood in them to dive for very long ways. And so it's very healthy, super healthy meat, very lean, but it's very high in protein, 6 times the amount of protein as beef. And so really good food there. When you have the dried meat, the intestines, and you have the seal oil, you're doing really well. Now, what's interesting is that the bearded seal meat there, the seal meat, it has your body can't normally absorb all that iron. Like if you took an iron pill, your body only really absorbs about 20% of that iron pill. Now, if you have vitamin C with it, with that iron pill, if you took a vitamin C pill with your iron pill, you'll absorb 80% of the iron pill. And so when we have bearded seal meat and Eskimo food, we call it nikkepak, we'll often have salmon berries and blueberries and things at the end of the meal. And of course, salmon berries, one cup of salmon berries, I'll show you later, has the same amount of vitamin C as 8 oranges. And so incredible food combinations we have here to stay nice and healthy. One last thing I'll show you is that little device on Cassidy's life jacket. So number one, she's got a life jacket. That's you need that out in the ocean. But secondly, that's an inReach device, and that device works kind of like a GPS, but it's also like a texting machine. And so you can hit track on there, and you can send that track to whoever's phone in town or whatever, their email, and you can also text people. And it's satellite driven. And so it works anywhere on the planet, anytime. You can text anybody anytime, and you can show them your location, and you can track where you're going. And it's really important for emergency purposes. So, for example, if Cassidy fell out of the boat or somehow the boat got away from the ice and she was on it, we would know exactly where she is, and she can text us as well how she's doing. So safety is a number one concern out there on the ice.
Great, thanks.
Yep. So bearded seal is one of our main foods in Qikiqtarjuq area because of the seal oil and because of the meat. It's a really big thing. Another really big thing for us is beluga. Sisok, we call them. They're white whales. They're about 16 to 20 feet long, and they come around here in June and July. Usually they're calving and they're trying to eat herring and smelt, tomcods, sometimes even salmon. They follow salmon in, and so we try to go out on calm days. If you go out on a calm day, you can see their wake in the water as they're swimming, and you can follow that wake, and then you can get behind them and harpoon them, or wait till they come up and shoot them and then harpoon them. And so that's how we get them in the Kotzebue Sound in the summer. There's communities like Point Hope and Barrow that get them along the ice floe edge starting in April. And so, but we don't do that because our ice floe is gone by the time June comes around. You can see here these little diamonds of beluga skin. That's the muktak. It's the skin and the blubber, and it's boiled. And so just like those dried intestines, we boil them first and then hang them. You can see past those belugas is, bearded seal meat. It's a real dark meat back there. But you hang these beluga pieces in little squares and keep them connected. They look like diamonds, and hang them up to dry after you cook them. You just try to get as much moisture out as possible before you put them in seal oil, because that's kind of how you store them as well. And so all year long, you can take out your beluga muktak, you can take out your bearded seal, your caribou meat, you can have seal oil and fish and just have a feast. And this beluga muktak, it's really good with mustard. Everybody has it with mustard. I don't know why, but it was something I think that was brought in years and years ago, maybe when the first chips and things started coming around. But yeah, beluga and mustard is really good. You can see some of this oil, bearded seal oil. It's nice and clear here in Kotzebue. And so the later on that you have it, if you have it for a year or more, it starts to get really yellow looking. And so we like the fresh ones. These are pretty fresh right there. You can see even the hazy ones, they're still pretty clear and pretty fresh. But when we used to trade with Eskimos up the Kobuk River, why they're up the Kobuk River 200 miles, and we would give them seal oil and they would give us furs and things like that because they need the oil too. The only thing is it takes so long to get the oil up to them, and so sometimes their oil would already be kind of yellow looking, and because of that, they actually like yellow oil. They prefer it because they're used to it. We prefer the fresh because we're used to it, and so it's a good thing to share. But you can see this seal oil is just really pure good stuff right there. And then on the right we have brown king crab, and it's like red king crab except they call them brown kings. When you cook them, it's just they turn red just like a red king crab, and so these are really really good eating. They're out here in the Kotzebue Sound, maybe 20 miles up the coast, and they're about 2 miles out from the beach. And what these king crab do, you can see that's a really clear shell. There's hardly any barnacles on it. It's a fresh shell. They come in the summer, um, kind of where streams come out of the land, and that where fresh water is flowing. Fresh water helps them shed their outer shell that has, and it might have barnacles on it all year long and different things, and they don't want that extra weight and stuff like that. So they want new shells every year. So they come into the coast there and the beach, wherever there's some fresh water coming out, and that fresh water will help them shed that old shell. And then they have the new shell under it that's coming up, and it'll kind of harden. And but either way, you can see there's a whole bunch of king crab. We don't have a commercial season for them, thank goodness. There's not enough to do a commercial season where we sell them, but we just get them for subsistence. And so you bring crab like this home. A lot of times we store them upside down in a tote because they're still moving, they're still alive. If you had them the way she has them right there, why they're gonna crawl out of those totes and they'll be all over your boat within an hour. Looks like the movie Aliens or something. But so yeah, we keep them upside down and they just kind of do this on the boat ride home. And then we take off the head part and the belly part. So we just have the legs, and you put them in a big pot of salt water with some Louisiana seasoning, and then you just kind of boil them for about 8 minutes until that shell turns this bright pink color. And then you take them out and you put them in an ice bath with salt water as well. You don't want to lose the saltiness throughout this process. You want to keep that meat nice and salty. And so you let them cool in there as well. If you don't have an ice bath, why that shell is almost like a little oven, and your meat will just kind of keep cooking in there even if you take them out. It takes a while for them to cool off once they're in that shell. And so what we do is we cool them, and just within a few minutes you can begin to eat them. And it's the best thing in the world, man, to eat king crab fresh in June. There's nothing like it, I'll tell you that. And we use sheefish for bait in our crab pots. Our crab pots aren't very big, maybe the size of your kitchen table. We have a 40-foot long rope attached to it, and we have a big sheefish. You saw the sheefish in the earlier slides, and we attach them into the inside of the crab pot. And that crab pot has these plastic fingers facing inwards like this. And so the crab can come in, and these fingers open up like this. But once the crab will go eat, well, it can't come back out because these fingers close like this. They're real flexible, and so the crab can't come out. And so that's how you catch them in the crab pots. And usually one crab pot can hold about 20 king crab. And so we have 5 pots out. You can really get about 100 crab a check. And that's just me and my family. We have 5 pots. Some families have 20 pots out there. Some have 30 or 40 pots out there. And so, yeah, it's a good subsistence harvest for us in June. As we move on to July, you can see here we still have some of the same things in July. We have beluga, king crab. One of the things that is changing now is we have chum salmon. Our chum salmon, they have the second highest fat content than any other chum salmon in the state. And so they're really, really good eating. I'll show you a picture here in a second, but chums usually come around the 4th of July. We'll be celebrating the 4th of July, and some families will already have a net out, and oftentimes it's that day that somebody will catch the first chum salmon of the season. And once they start showing up, they're here pretty good. The commercial fishing season for chums here opens July 10th, and it doesn't close till August 31st. The peak is around August 1st or so for the chum salmon run. I think last year we got 42 cents a pound, and these are about 8-pound fish, so a little over $3 a fish sometimes if you get some big fish, and you can make some pretty good money that way, as well as keep some for the house. In July, we're also getting waterfowl. We're getting ducks and geese that are flightless. In the summer, like the king crab, they are shedding their feathers, their older feathers, and they're getting some new ones. They're molting, and so they're going to get new feathers. And during that little 1-week period, they're really swimming in big groups in the middle of lakes. And so what we do is we get out in kayaks and we chase them to the shore. We kind of herd them to the shore, and then they run out on the land and they can't fly away. And so what we do is we run after them, we grab them, and it's a lot of fun. And then we tuck their heads under their wings. And when you tuck a duck head under its wing, it thinks it's hiding. And so you can just leave it on the ground and then go chase some other ones. And it'll stay there for you for a couple hours. You can even go have lunch and stuff, and they'll still be sitting there when you get back. And so you just get as many as you need and then move on. So it's good to have good ducks and geese in the summer. We also are looking for sourdock. That's around the 4th of July as well. Sourdock is like a wild rhubarb, and it's like big green leaves. And so we go and find these places where there's a lot of sourdock. Korach is the Eskimo name, and we'll grab those leaves and pinch them at the root, and then we put them in a bag, and you just keep grabbing leaves. They're big, long. You'll see a picture here in a second, but big, long leaves. And so we'll get that sourdock and bring them home, and then we cut them into pieces with scissors. We boil them, and then we mash them, and then we let them ferment in our porch downstairs, which is kind of cool, for about a week. And then you just kind of keep mashing and stirring for a whole week, and eventually kind of ferments just a little bit, and then you can put them in Ziploc bags or whatever and store them for the season. Whenever you have Eskimo food, you bring out your sourdough and mix that in with your berries, a little bit of carnation milk, a little bit of sugar, and man, you're good to go. 1 cup of that sourdough cooked has the same vitamin A as 156 little carrot sticks, and so a lot of vitamin A in that sourdough. In the summer, you can see we're also getting reindeer. They're down the coast, and a lot of times on a calm day, they go down to the ocean to cool off and get away from the bugs on the tundra. And so, if a person wanted to get reindeer, they just wait for a glass calm day and go down the coast and can get some. Northern pike, they're sunning themselves in the shallow water in the rivers, in the sloughs up the Noatak and Kobuk rivers. And so we'll fish for northern pike with rod and reel. Trout and grayling, you can fish for rod and reel with a rod and reel as well, but I like to fly fish for them and get them in the summer. And then last in July is the mastodon ivory, walrus tusks and mastodon tusks. They're down the coast, and as the bluffs kind of melt, they fall away. These tusks and stuff will start showing on the edges of the hills. And then, of course, if there's a big storm and a walrus dies, a lot of times it'll be washed up to shore, and then you can go and get those tusks as well. So you can see here, this is my daughter Cassidy on the left, and she's taken a chum salmon out of the commercial fishing net. We can fish with 3 shackles of net, which is 900 feet. And this is my aluminum skiff that we use to put the fish in. So she's learned over the years how to take fish off, and then we bring them to the market and sell them. Ty here is one of the helpers, and you can see there he's got a nice 10-pound male chum. You can tell it's a male by its nose. It's got a big old hook nose. A female, the nose will be just a little bit shorter or even with the bottom jaw. But this is a nice fat male you can see here, and good eating right there. On the left is that sourdough I was telling you about, big green leaves. Now this picture is actually a little bit later in June because those leaves are turning red. I'm sorry, in July. And so you right around the 4th of July is the peak time to pick these buggers, because they're green all the way through. You get about on June 10th, June 15th, and that's when you see them starting to fade already, almost like it's fall time, and they're losing that chlorophyll green color at the tips there, and they start turning red on you. And it's not exactly the best to eat. You could still eat them, but we prefer to get them when they're full green and 4th of July. Now, the only issue with that is there's a ton of mosquitoes out there in these lakes and on the tundra around that time of year. So you got to either have a lot of bug dope or you got to have a good head net to get sourdough. On the right there, towards the end of July, is fireweed. And wherever there's a fire, there's going to be fireweed. And so we'll go down the coast a lot of times, and different places wherever there was a fire, there's going to be this fireweed showing up. And what we do is we make fireweed jelly with those flowers right there, those pink flowers. We'll go to that fireweed plant, and you strip all of those flower petals with your fingers like this, and all you end up with a handful of flower petals. Now you got to make sure there's no bumblebees on them flower petals, otherwise them bumblebees will sting you right in the hand, and that's not going to be pretty. Scream like a girl, start running through the willows. But anyways, so yeah, we get all these flower petals, so we bring them home, usually a couple of big plastic bags full, 2 or 3 of them, and then you let them sit for 2 or 3 days. Any bugs that's in them, it gets cool enough in your porch to where if there is a bumblebee in there that maybe didn't bite you, didn't sting you, they're slow enough that they're not going to mess with you too much. And so we then bring them upstairs, put them on a cardboard, take off anything that doesn't belong. We put those flower petals in a pot with some water, and you boil it. And then that color, that pink color, goes away, and leaves the flower, and it goes right into the water. And so you end up with this beautiful pink juice. use a strainer and you get those old gray flower petals off. And then now you're ready to make fireweed jelly. You add some pectin and some sugar, and it's a process to that, but you end up with some really good fireweed jelly for the year. In August, you can see here there's still a little bit of fireweed left, some chum salmon, waterfowl. What we are moving to here towards the end of summer, though, is our blueberries and our salmon berries. And so, and then we can hunt moose in August. But a lot of people don't, maybe towards the end they might, but usually moose hunting starts around September 5th or so. But people, because the season does open in August, there are some people who do get some moose in August. One animal that I didn't put on here was Dall sheep. We have some mountains up north and a lot of Dall sheep in those mountains, but over the years, because of climate change, we've had some rains in the winter that cover their food source and on the ground, and so they haven't really been thriving too well. So we haven't been able to hunt them because their numbers are down. But we do get moose and still get a lot of chum salmon in August, waterfowl. The ducks and geese are starting to head south in August. Around August 20th is when you'll start seeing these geese and stuff really start moving through in big flocks. And so you can see here my daughter Cassidy with a nice northern pike. We used in that commercial fishing skiff there. It's a flat bottom, so it gets into shallow lakes and ponds. And these pike like those little weeds back there. They like that shallow water. It's warmer in the shallow water. And it's like they're a cold-blooded creature. They need to go and warm up in that shallow water to have lots of energy to do what they got to do and hunt. These pike have many, many teeth in their mouth. Their whole inside of their mouth, their tongue included, is all teeth, sharp little teeth that face inwards. So if you were to get your finger caught in there, they have like a vice grip, like a pit bull, and they just will not let go, and it just messes your whole finger up, cuts it into pieces really. That's why you see Cassidy here, she's holding that pike by its eyeballs. She's not holding it by underneath the gills because her fingers might go in there and touch those teeth. And so we never put your fingers by the mouth of a pike. And so we'll take these pike home and we'll scale them and we'll fillet them out. Sometimes we smoke them and can them. Other times we just hang them for drying in the summer there towards late end August. You can see here our blueberries are starting to ripen up in August. On the right is the salmon berries. We call them ukpiks, and that's me and my wife, Karina. And remember I told you 1 cup of ukpiks, 1 cup of salmon berries has the same amount of vitamin C as 8 oranges. So lots and lots of vitamin C right there in those pitchers, in those buckets. It's a lot of hard work, but it's really worth it. And so we'll gather all this ukpiks, and they have a certain time of the year too that they ripen. You kind of got to time them just right. You got to go out there and check like every few days in August to kind of find that sweet spot when there's very many ripe ones, because you wait another week longer, they'll start turning real kind of grayish colored, and they're not as sweet as they should be. And so we pick them a certain time. You can see here is all beautiful colored salmon berries there. And then of course those blues. And so what we'll do is we'll bring those home and we'll put them in Ziploc bags a lot of times. And then we put them in the freezer. And throughout the winter, whenever you want to have ice cream, man, that's the best. I'll tell you what, you get that vanilla ice cream with a strawberry swirl in it. They sell them in those big buckets, right? And you put that in your bowl, and then you mix blueberries and salmon berries, and you stir it in that ice cream. And oh my goodness, that's the best in the world. But yeah, berries is really good for us, and short amount of time to pick them, but we get them. You can see here, I think these are towards the end of my slides here, as the sun is fading there in August, we start getting darkness then. Most of the summer, May, June, July. It's almost 24-hour daylight in Kotzebue. Here we're about 32 miles above the Arctic Circle. And so, but in August, this is the first time that the sun begins to really set, and darkness kind of is starting to come back. And so you can see on the left there is salmon. These are this is canned smoked salmon. So again, it's those chum salmon that we saw earlier. I'll fillet them and I'll bring them to the house. Eventually, I'll take the meat off of the skin. I'll smoke them for just 3 or 4 hours to get a smoke on them, get that smoky flavor. Put them in these jars right there and put some seasoning in them, and then pressure cook them. And it's super good with crackers and different things throughout the winter. If you're gonna have a Super Bowl party, you can bring out your smoked salmon. It's nice and oily and just really good stuff. So I think that's it for my slides. If any of you guys have any questions.
One of the comments that came up actually from Donna is that she was familiar with the term subsistence, but she didn't know the depth of the work that's involved all year long to process all of the food, and she wanted to just acknowledge what a tremendous amount of work it is to, it must be great to go out and be able to get the food, but then it's a constant, you're always processing one kind of food or another.
Every single week we're doing something. Every week in Kotzebue we're doing something, and it's almost everything. Sometimes it's different a little bit. Yesterday, for example, I had to go and check my lynx traps and otter traps up the Noatak River, about 10 miles away. And so on the way there, the mouth of Noatak, there's sheefish under the ice. And so I brought my auger with me and my hooks, and I fished through the ice. And sure enough, I got 20 really big sheefish yesterday. And so but you can't, like I said, you kind of got to know where to go. You got to know how to use an auger. You got to know how to bring fish up and cut them and things like that. You got to know how to set your line just the right depth. There's a lot to it, and once you learn these skills, you'll never lose them. And that's why it's so important to go out and gain as many subsistence skills as a person can, because it's not just knowing where to go or knowing how to get it, but and then actually getting it, and then actually, learning how to process it and put it away for the however long, and then of course how to prepare it for food and eat it and share it. And there's just so much knowledge that's involved with all of that. Unfortunately, so many students in school don't learn these things. These things are really passed on from like a mentor, from somebody who really knows their skill. And so I had a particular mentor for fishing for sheefish through the ice. I had a particular mentor for trapping beaver and otter and mink. I had a completely separate mentor, another guy who taught me how to hunt bearded seals. I had a complete separate other um, mentor who taught me how to hunt ring seals. And so you just have these different teachers throughout your time, and they teach you one skill at a time, and you learn it. And like I said, you never lose it. So fortunately for me, I've gained quite a few skills over the years, and I still have a lot more to gain. We still learn a lot of lessons, but I'm just glad with what I know now, so I can put food on the table for my family.
I'm sure I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because I'm sure that the aspect that you were talking about with your mentors in your community, that kind of community knowledge can be shared to so many people, and I'm sure you've probably shared it with many youth yourself over the years. I mean, you have so many pictures of your kids, but I'm sure that you've talked to other youth in the community about some of these skills as well.
Yeah, all the time. You take my son took my son Tyler out the other day, and his friend Ben came out with us, and that Ben actually outfished Tyler and myself. We gave Ben the best hook. They're both 14-year-olds. Ben's never fished for sheefish, and I told him, I said, man, that's just beginner's luck. After that, you ain't gonna get nothing. But he had a blast. Like I said, you start learning those skills, and it never leaves you. And I forget what how the saying goes, you can feed a man a fish for 1,000 days, or you can teach him how to fish and he can feed himself, for 1,000 days. And so that's the thing, is we try to teach people how to feed themselves, and it's more just it's more than just food, really. There's a spiritual aspect to subsistence when you're out there in the country. When I was out there in the trees yesterday, checking my traps, and there was a live lynx in my trap, and I'm talking to the lynx, and I go to dispatch it, and I'm standing in the trees in the sunlight, and I got this beautiful lynx that I'm taking home. There's a spiritual aspect to subsistence. There's the physical aspect of working hard to go get them, right? There's the nutritional aspect of this incredibly good eating food, with all the vitamins and minerals that they provide. And then, of course, there's the social impact that subsistence have when we go out and do these things together as a community. And as we share with each other in the community, as we teach each other, very educational. There's just so many components to subsistence that many people don't really know. And, you know, processing is a whole nother ball game. The slides that I showed you today were really just harvesting, 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 harvesting. But if we were to just do salmon, for example, you'll see the whole process of where to set a net, how to set a net, and how to take a fish out, how to cut a fish, how to prepare a fish for smoking, how to prepare a fish for canning, how to prepare a fish for the vacuum sealer, how to prepare a fish for the, for the oven. Um, there's so much that goes into it. So yeah, it's good information.
Well, thank you so much, Lance, for sharing all of this knowledge with us. We've got a lot of comments that are very grateful for you sharing your knowledge with us and with our students that have been watching. And in closing, I was wondering whether whether you have any words of advice for the students who are watching the webinar.
Yes, I would say that anytime, you guys, if you get a chance to go out somewhere and do something with somebody, take that opportunity, because you're going to, number one, you're going to have some fun. Number two, you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to gain some serious good skills, because you can't just buy food at the store all the time. I know some of you kids like to just go to the store with your parents and buy hot chips and all that, but you can't get full off of hot chips. At some point, you're going to have some of these native foods mixed in, because the food at the stores is just too much money. Frozen turkey costs 99 bucks. A gallon of milk is $10. And so you have to offset that cost. You'll see when you get out of school someday and you have to buy your own food, that you're going to have to actually get out there and get sheefish and get caribou and get moose and get seals and get salmon and fill your freezers, because you just can't make it living off the stores alone up here. And so, like I said, as young as you can, start getting out with people. If your parents don't get out much, then find somebody else who does. Like I said, I have different mentors that I personally asked. I called them and I said, could you teach me how to trap beaver and otters, muskrats, and mink? And he said, yeah, I'll take you. I asked another guy, could you teach me how to get bearded seals on the ice? And so seek people out and say, can you teach me how to do this, or teach me how to do that? And they'll, most people will teach you. So yeah, move forward and strive to learn.
Great. Thank you so much, Lance. This has been a great talk and so much information, and we really, really appreciate you talking to
Yeah,
the students and talking with us about all of the knowledge that you have.
well, thanks for having me today.
Great. Thanks so much, Lance.
Yep, see you guys.
All right. Bye-bye.